I created a raised bed stock tank garden in an unused and overgrown area of my backyard. To do that, I had to remove trees, shrubs, and lots of weeds. I took some video footage of the space before I started the stock tank garden about a year and a half ago, and I'm going to show you a short clip of that right now so that you can see how much the space has changed for yourself. This whole back corner is kind of wonky right now. There's a fountain here. There's a tree that we decided to keep because it kind of made it a little bit more dappled shade back here. But I think it's going to be really nice back here. It'll be like a little kitchen garden corner that'll be separate from the in-ground beds that we're planning on and the fruit trees. Also, we've got this crusty little shed over here in the corner too that was being hidden by that huge oleander. We've got right now just thrown here our irrigation supplies and our tomato baskets and our little pots for planting transplants and stuff like that. After I cleared the space, I had to measure out exactly where I wanted the stock tanks to be. Now, I kept in mind that I wanted to be able to have space to get a wheelbarrow through the paths between the stock tanks and also to be able to have enough space to work. So I left about 3 feet between the first and second row and then also 2 feet between each individual stock tank, and that has so far left me plenty of space to be able to get the wheelbarrow in and to work as I need to. Overall, I've been really happy with how this space has turned out, other than the fact that the spaces between the stock tanks gets a little bit muddy during the monsoon and winter rains that we get in southern Arizona, and also probably from the residual moisture from my irrigation. Initially, I was looking at doing wood chips because they're very inexpensive. However, there was this really strange flagstone path the previous owner had put in. It started at our back door over near where the stock tank garden is now, and it arched across in kind of a rainbow shape to the other side of the yard and abruptly ended. So we knew we wanted to remove that flagstone path. We just weren't sure what to do with the materials. Those materials are not cheap, and so we definitely wanted to keep them. So we removed that flagstone path and we stacked up the flagstone in a part of the yard where we thought we weren't going to be putting any sort of garden bed in at the time. Well, as gardens go, they tend to expand, and so I needed that space, and also I still had the mud problem near my stock tank garden, so we decided to use the flagstones for a flagstone patio around the stock tank garden. Along with the flagstones, we saved the sand that they were sitting on top of. So we saved everything. I used wood chips around my in-ground garden, and that has been doing a great job of keeping down the weeds and the mud. But I wanted something a little more fanciful in my stock tank garden. Now, the stock tanks are irregularly shaped. We've got round stock tanks and we've got oval shaped stock tanks, and some of our stock tanks are 4 feet long and some of them are a little bit longer than that. We thought using the flagstones would be a fun, whimsical, creative, rustic way to use materials that we already had and also really clean up the stock tank garden space. My husband did tile and marble long time ago in a past career, and so he has some of the knowledge and skills to be able to do that, luckily, and so we enlisted the help of our son, lucky him, to help my husband lay the flagstone. Before I talk about how the flagstone was laid, I want to talk about some of the advantages and a disadvantage of using flagstone in your garden for a patio space. One of the main advantages of using this flagstone is that we wanted something that was permeable to water. Since we live in an arid climate, we wanted to keep as much moisture as possible in the soil around our house and garden. To be permeable, the flagstone has to be laid on top of a bed of sand or gravel. The spaces in between the flagstone needs to be filled with some sort of porous aggregate material like gravel, or in our case, we crushed some of the smaller pieces of flagstone and we used that along with sand to pack the spaces between the large pieces. So that is dry laid. As a reference, a wet laid patio is one that is set in concrete and the joints are grouted with mortar, and it is not permeable to water. Any water that falls on that space is going to run off into the areas around that patio. The disadvantage is that this flagstone material is uneven, so if you're thinking about using it in your space and you have anyone that has any sort of disability or mobility issue, it might be a tripping hazard or hard for them to be able to navigate around on a material that is uneven in certain spaces. We decided on kind of a scalloped edge rather than a straight edge. By not using hard straight lines and a more formal style, I think that this makes the space all the more fun to hang out on. It's very rustic, and I just love it. Those of you that garden know that a lot of work happens in the garden, but not a lot of just spending time and relaxing happens out in the garden. And so I wanted to put in a space where I could have a seating area and a place to hang out and enjoy the garden on a different level than just coming out here to work or harvest or plant. Let's talk about the process that we use to lay our flagstone patio. I'm sharing this so that you can see the progress that we're making on our garden, and it's not so much a how-to video. If you want to learn more in depth how to set a flagstone patio, this is not the video for you. So this is just me sharing my experience and also the before and after of a project that I'm really excited about. First, we leveled the soil so it was sloped for good water drainage and level where it needed to be. Next, we spread a thick, even layer of paver sand to form the bed for the flagstone to rest on. Then, we laid the flagstone on the sand, starting with the large pieces around the perimeter and working our way to the center. There were spaces between each of the stones that needed to be filled in with coarse material first. We crushed smaller, broken pieces of flagstone and filled in those spaces. This helped to create a locking effect. All of this material was stamped firmly in place and watered in. Next, we scattered sand between the coarsely filled spaces until all those spaces were packed in firmly. Lastly, paver locks and spikes were added around the edges to hold the patio in place. This project is definitely one in which we practice the principles of repurposing and reusing. We've reused the flagstone, which is definitely not an inexpensive material. We reused the sand that the original path was set on. We also used the soil that we cleared away from some of our garden beds to help us level out the space when we first put the garden beds in. And we reused a couple of other things too. We had a table that we brought from our old house that we were able to fit into the space. We reused an old chimney that we had. It's got a few cracks along the back of it, but we used some wire to stabilize it, and I think that we can get a few more seasons out of it. And we also reused the old fountain that was here from the previous owners. It's not exactly my style, but I still really like having a fountain in the space. And we even reused the twinkle lights that we had. So all in all, this is a very cheap project. We had to buy some additional sand, and we had to buy the paver locks and spikes that we used to make the edge and to keep the sandstone patio in place. It's only been a few weeks, and we've already enjoyed quite a few cups of coffee in the morning at our little patio table under a tree, and some fires in our chimney at night with the twinkle lights above. It's amazing how fast you get used to things. When I look back on the before videos of this space, I can't believe how terrible it looked. We had extra garden materials just piled up. There was just dirt and weeds and trees, and it was just a yucky, dark corner of the yard that I didn't want to be in. And now it's actually turned into one of my favorite spaces. I hope that this gives you some ideas for how you could use some of your materials that you might have lying around, or maybe somehow be able to source some materials that are free or very cheap that you could use to create a space of your own. I'm Kara from the Little Mission Garden. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.